Evolutionary.org Hardcore 2.0, episode 68 coming your way. This one's going to be a special tribute to Monstro Marco Luis. Rest in peace. Compliments of Euro Pharma, as he was a big Euro Pharma. I know he was a rep for Euro Pharma. He also loved EuroPharmacies products. That was a big part of his stacks. So we're gonna pay tribute to him on this episode. We're gonna go over his early life, how it shaped who he became. We're going to talk about his background, where he lived. We're going to discuss his bodybuilding ventures and social media. We're going to talk about his massive steroid cycles. We're going to discuss, a little more about EuroPharmacies and talk about some of the products that he was using. So it's going to be a really, really interesting podcast as we give tribute to him. So I'll bring in Mobster shortly. Just early life. Monstro, of course, that was his nickname. In Portuguese, it meant monster. That's correct, right, Mobster?
Yeah, he's actually used that word as a means of identifying himself online. So yes.
So it's Portuguese, and he was let's talk. He was basically born in 1977, died in 2024. He had several medical issues, pre-existing conditions. And look, we all do. We all do. We all have. I was born with jaundice myself, so I could consider that a pre-existing condition. So he did have some pre-existing conditions with fatty liver disease. He had celiac disease, which a lot of us, again, do, especially those of us who grew up in America during the 80s. We all are, gluten the gluten generation. Now as adults, we all have gluten issues. I stay away from gluten. I know to stay away from it. So he also had some heart conditions, and that's why he was on medication for his heart conditions. And that's what we think happened to him, that it was a heart attack. That was what was reported happened to him, but obviously he had a lot of other issues. So yeah, Mobster touched on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, look, let's start with how we heard Steve. I mean, the post over that particular weekend, he'd gone out to FIBO. We're going to talk about his FIBO cycle and his reputation for his cycles later on. So he'd gone out to FIBO. I know for a fact, and we're going to get into that as well, that he'd been to FIBO on multiple occasions. He'd done a bunch of promotional work, and we're going to talk about what it means to be a professional bodybuilder like Monstro. And basically didn't post any pictures over that weekend. And then I think it was late Sunday, Monday, when, as everybody else did, on the forums, on RX Muscle and a bunch of other places, we saw a post that his wife had put up, and we passed away. And you're like, what the fuck? Right? So the problem was, Steve, in a perverse way, and it's actually kind of perverse insofar as this can happen to other professional bodybuilders, he'd had an Instagram account previously, and it had been hacked. And I even said, well, how come they're posting this and how come they're posting that at the time when he said it had been hacked? But the reality was they were actually stealing photographs from his other profile, the one that he'd created again after the first one had been hacked, with the legitimate stuff that he was posting. And they would go over to the fake profile and post up photographs there. So I said to Stevesmi, was like, as Monstro passed away, what the fuck? I'm seeing this stuff come up. I'm not sure which account is a legitimate one. What the fuck's going on, sort of thing. And we didn't want to say anything straight away in case, and we actually have seen this happen a couple of times before, when actors, politicians, and to a lesser degree famous professional bodybuilders, I think one I actually posted myself on my Facebook, Steve, rather foolishly, stating that Victor Richard had passed away. And it turns out that Victor Richard was quite alive and was a bit put out by the fact that people like myself and others had posted this stuff saying, Victor Richards was a great bodybuilder, but he's passed away. What a fucking shame, sort of thing. So you don't want to say that someone's dead and have them come on the forums on Tuesday go, what the fuck, guys? I was just having a quiet couple of days at FIBO. I was working. I was too busy to post. So we didn't get into it. But unfortunately, it turned out to be true. And we believe, and again, we are not privy to the inquest or autopsy or whatever, Steve, but we believe, as Steve said, it's related to heart issues. The pre-existing medical conditions, like Steve, I believe, were from, like Steve said himself just now, from childhood, and included issues with the stomach, with the celiac disease that Steve's mentioned, and a couple of other things. But essentially, I've seen Monstro himself refer to having difficulties as a child, basically meaning for many years he struggled to put on weight. He was having these particular medical issues, and it made he wasn't great at sports, etc., etc. Fortunately, at some point, He's obviously discovered weight training, and obviously his nutrition was restricted, but in a perverse way, of course. As one of my buddies has got a similar medical condition, it means you just have to be very strict with your diet. And fortunately, combined with the training, this has meant that the healthy diet, especially on a Mediterranean island that he was living on, I say Mediterranean, Steve, I believe it's actually off the coast of Africa. And I'm going to say then, I'll see if I get this right, guys, is Terceira, which is a
Tercera. I actually looked it up. Tercera. Yeah, and it's a part of the where he lived was part of the Azores. And yeah, it's
between Africa and Portugal, right?
Yeah, but it's considered Mediterranean. I mean, you gotta remember it was settled by the Portuguese, so it was a Portuguese island.
Ago, yeah.
So if you go there,
we've seen pictures, Steve. You and I both said it's a beautiful island. Sometimes what happens, and I think even Monstro said this, there's actually pictures of Monstro looking up on the hills, looking at the mountains, and it's sometimes what happens is because you live in paradise, you don't realize you're living in paradise.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so what sometimes happens is, there's no gyms on the island. I have difficulties getting this or getting that. And then you'll see a picture of him with his vest on, doing a lat spread or whatever else, up on some fucking viewing point, looking over lush subtropical forest or wherever I should go. Hey, Monstro, it doesn't look too bad to me, motherfucker. It looks like a really nice place to live. Obviously, when you're on island, it's that much more difficult.
Visiting a place like that is paradise, but sometimes when you live on an island, it can feel like claustrophobic.
It's difficult to get stuff delivered.
It's difficult to leave. Because it's like if the island doesn't have like an airport, you've got to take a boat to a different island, then take a small airplane to a bigger airport, then take so it can feel like
he's had to do that multiple times, man. He had to do that multiple times to do some of the stuff that he's done traveling around the world. So anyway, we go along a little bit further, and there are photographs online, and I actually argued about this, and I'll talk about a little bit now, but I'll get onto the other bit in a second. I said that my initial relationship with Monstro was a little bit of butting heads. That might be down to our personality types, and I suspect that's what it is. There's also an element of, and again, we're going to get into this as well. I'll say that I was big on, as Steve and I are both big on, the whole moderate, as healthy as you can way of cycling. And so he wasn't really defensive or aggressive about it, but I think everybody needs to take this amount of steroids. Now come on, I take far, far less. I outweigh you by 50 pounds. You shouldn't be out there spreading this message and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, look, right. So one of the photographs, I'll stick specifically to this. I've seen photographs of him looking in his teens, Steve, absolutely amazing. And by his own admission, and this is again from an Instagram post, this was on no more than his mother's healthy food. This is a guy in his late teens with a six-pack, broad-shouldered, muscular, way better than 99% of the teenagers that would have been around him. So he would have stood out, Steve, absolutely stood out as a physique in his teens. So I will say, in spite of the medical issues, in spite of having to sort of live on a simplified diet and whatever else, he had the genetics to be the great bodybuilder that he became. And when you look, guys, Steve, I think I had a 4-pack in my teens, and I was so lean at some point that I had to split my biceps. But trust me, Monstro in his teens, excuse me, was on another level. So, excuse me, great genetics, Steve, for store.
Yeah, let me jump in. So, he was only 5'4", so when you're that short, I know it because I'm only 5'6" on a good day. So when you're that short, like you go out to play football and they just look at you and they're like, why would they even give you a chance? They're going to give the guy who's 6 foot tall a chance. Basketball, they'll laugh at you if you go out to try for for basketball. So it's just like, soccer even, being tall in soccer is beneficial. You can jump up and hit the ball with your head. You can be a better goalie when you've got more length to you. You can, go down the field and strike the ball or whatever, kick the ball further. There's so many advantages to height. So when you're a shorter guy, like myself and like Monstro, really you've got two options, growing up to play: wrestling and weightlifting, because those are by weight class. So it's advantageous to be shorter in those two sports because, you don't see too many bodybuilders who are like over 6 foot tall for a reason. It is definitely a more advantageous thing to be shorter. And it helps you, especially in something that's by weight class. So it gives you an
Yeah.
advantage.
Any muscle that you add, listen, right? 5 pounds on me, put it crudely, Steve, I could shit it out in the weekend, right? 5 pounds when you're 5'4", 5'6", 5'7", 5'8", 5'9", is visible, literally visible. You will see the transformation at a person that's added 5 pounds at that height. And so, arguably, look at the most recent Mr. Olympias. The last two have been specifically from the 212 class, so they will be shorter bodybuilders. You don't see it when they're standing up on stage, flexing in front of the cameras and the crowd and whatever else. But when in person, if you put them against someone who's 6 foot tall, you see it. But again, listen, right? I've seen photographs of him at 100 odd kilograms, 220 pounds. I believe his absolute heaviest was somewhere between 240 and 250, but obviously a little bit uncomfortable. When he's got back down to his conditioned weight, he's looked amazing at that weight, and certainly he looked amazing as a teenager, Steve. So yeah, there's arguably in bodybuilding for bodybuilding purposes, if you've got a genetic predisposition to add muscle, as he did, especially in his teens, and you are relatively short, he's only a few inches shorter than the average 5'9", 5'11", and you add a few pounds of muscle, it can transform your physique. It really, really can. I want to touch upon now, Steve, what we would say, what he was doing recently in terms of his bodybuilding career, and what that means in terms of being a professional bodybuilder, because this is a huge part. And this is where I think Monstro, the more I got to know him, the more respect that I had for him, and arguably for him with me, because I've done some of the same things that he did. In fact, I've even had these conversations with athletes that want to become professional bodybuilders, weightlifters, strongmen, and so on and so forth. Right. So listen, I'm going to say 2017, there or thereabouts. Steve, it was difficult trying to find out a specific day online. Was when I believe he earned his WABBA Pro card. Now, Steve and I have actually done a podcast, and just because you win a pro card doesn't mean instantly you are a professional bodybuilder. It just means you've won the ability to say that you're a WABBA Pro, an IFBB Pro, whatever. But the reality is, you have to fucking do something with it. You have to work it. And on that basis, he was a professional bodybuilder. Absolutely, right? So he was an online coach. And I don't just mean specifically nutrition, bodybuilding, whatever else. In fact, one of the things that he promoted more than once was as a motivator. So motivational coach. I go out there, get it done, son, work your ass off. This is how you get to be big and strong like me, and so on and so forth. Words to that effect, and you work with your clients and find out what the needs are. So as a motivator, as someone who talks about bodybuilding nutrition, specifically competition diets, as an online coach, this is what you should be doing in a gym. Are you doing something like that? Is that working? And so on and so forth. And he'd been doing that for a good few years on that basis alone. As Steve said, he repped for companies. Now, I've owned a supplement company in the past, and I would literally have people ask me, if you'll send me this amount of protein in a t-shirt, I'll wear your t-shirt down the gym. That really is not going to sell me fuck all, Steve. It's not. I'm not going to get. I'd be very, very surprised if I got a single order out of someone doing that. So in reality, that means things like absolutely mentioning that company online a shitload. It definitely means hashtagging, especially on social media, now the fuck out of that particular company again. Every single time there's a picture of you in a gym wearing their item of clothing, or you're using their product, drinking something from a shaker. Hashtag, hashtag, hashtag. You've got to work that. You may well be required, and this is something that Monstro did a big part on, which I'm going to touch on next, to come to certain particular events. It might be a competition, for example, in strongman, where you're required to be there, sitting in the crowd, and maybe handing out trophies to the athletes. It may be, and this is a big part where I've got some respect back and forth between myself and Monstro, is exhibitions. Now, I've seen, because he actually posted a picture of this and he mentioned it as well, a 20-foot banner, and I believe this was also at FIBO, but certainly at a big competition, big event, 20-foot poster hanging from the fucking ceiling, hanging from the rafters of the exhibition hall, wherever the fuck it was, Steve, and it was Monstro on a 20-foot. I've had the pleasure of a 6-foot. This fucker's like 4 times the size of the banner that they did for me, Steve. And it means you are arguably sometimes, Steve, 8 fucking hours. You might get a small break in there. 8 hours of talking to 8 people visiting the expo, of representing the company. It doesn't sound like much, but really it's 12 or 40 now because it's a long day. You're super busy. It could be thousands of customers, thousands of people coming over. You've got to be happy all the time. You've got to be shaking hands. And it is a job of work, trust me. And at the same time, and I'm going to include Monstro in this again, Steve, if you like it, if you enjoy that meet and greet kind of aspect to it, if it's not, oh, I missed out on a protein shake or whatever else, but you literally like meeting people, showing off your physique, then Monstro absolutely, again, was a professional bodybuilder. Something else he's done, Steve. And he's actually done this, again, excuse me. Yeah, so listen, right? You need to be the kind of personality that enjoys getting out and meeting and greeting people. So the other thing that he did a few times, and he actually stood out in this particular way, Steve. I mean, I talked about doing exhibition work, and I've met one or two famous people, but Monstro went out of his way to, I mean, just by force of personality, can I video you? And we're talking about Mr. fucking Olympias here. We're talking about Ronnie Coleman giving you a shout out for your physique. We're talking about shaking hands and pointing towards and having a conversation with Jay Cutler. We're talking about the current Mr. Olympia, Derek Lunsford, and a bunch of others, people working on other stats, former Mr. Olympias, former Mr. USAs, former Mr. Arnold Schwarzenegger winners, and so on and so forth. This is absolutely amazing. I think one was Flex Wheeler and a bunch of others. And if you go through his Instagram feed and you scroll down, you would be surprised at the number of people. And these are not just photographs of shaking hands, which of course he would have had to have done himself with visitors, but literally top professional bodybuilders stopping for a minute, checking out each other's physiques, having a great conversation. And arguably, this is a whole part of being a pro because they're doing exactly what he's doing. And that's exactly how you make a living. You're going to get paid a very nice, if small salary for doing this, but it's an important part. We can call it networking, Steve, whatever else, but it also shows a passion of the man himself and arguably the people that he's meeting and greeting, and even his pros, as fans of the sport, people that enjoy doing what you're doing and recognize that you're working the same way that they are. And, you know, maybe they see an element of themselves in you and the way that you're doing this kind of stuff, because it's kind of weird, Steve, in that young men, especially that come to the sport, kind of half imagine this is maybe what's going to happen, that people are going to see my physique, they're going to be amazed, and I'm going to get a sports car. I'm going to do no. You've got to work it. You've got to work it, and you've got to enjoy working it. So for me, that was a big, big thing. I think the final thing, of course, and especially in 2024, as we do this show, is the social media aspect. So I've talked about these videos and photographs. I talked about him sharing this kind of stuff, whether it's photographs of him, videos of him training in gyms in Germany, gyms in Portugal, gyms on the island, but specifically his own home gym. Obviously, even silly little things like birthday shopping or going for a meal. One of his particular passions I've touched upon in the show notes, Steve, is that he was, I won't know necessarily he was especially religious, because I can't say that, and I don't know. But for whatever reason, he liked visiting, and there's a bunch of photographs to prove what I'm saying, churches and specifically the larger, more sort of a spectacular cathedral. So if he was traveling around and he wasn't too busy, if he had a day spare, him and his wife, she would travel to him. So a lot of these events, especially in the last few years, would go off to visit some sort of local cathedral or whatever else. Whereas I think there's a fantastic one in Madrid. There was stuff in Germany that he's posted up and so on and so forth. So whether you're religious or not, you can still admire that particular thing. I'm going to say that it's religious, but I wouldn't want to, 100% say what his faith was or whatever else. And it doesn't really matter. The point is, of course, that he had passions outside of bodybuilding, and that's a great way for balance. As I get older, Steve, I think just for myself, I say I've become far more interested in local history than before, and know probably more about where I live now than arguably where I was born and brought up in that particular way, certainly the local history. And it's nice to see that Monstro had these other things going on, because, in order to be as driven and as obsessed as you need to be a professional bodybuilder, you need to have some sort of balance in your life. And whether that's family, whether that's religion, whether it's enjoying religious architecture or whatever else, it's important you have a balance. So it was nice to see that it wasn't always bodybuilding, wasn't always weightlifting. And again, he doesn't need to post these things online. They're not really necessarily what the fans go for, whatever else, but it's still once you start to get to know that personality, you want to know more about a person, it's good to see that there are other things. It may be fucking flower collecting, Steve. It doesn't really matter. I'll touch upon something else, and I think I'll bring Steve in on us as well, right? So here's the thing, and I'll include myself again in this, Steve, because Steve's way, way better at this shit than I am, right? Your online presence, and we're speaking specifically to a lesser degree social media, but also on the forums. The phrase that we used here in our show notes to talk about what we're talking about today with regards to Monstro was butting heads on the forums. So here's the thing, right? And I've done this in the past. I tend to take a quite simple KISS, keep it simple, stupid approach to the way that I sometimes talk online. If I'm in the mood, I'll post a load of stuff, give you the background information for the reason why I asked something. But if I'm not, and if I'm time restricted, I'll just give you the piece of information you need to know, and that's it. The problem is that sometimes that creates a certain way of thinking in other people that are observing what you've written and go, well, why is he not friendly? Why is he not this? Why is he not that? And it can come across in a certain particular way. It might not be at all how I am, as you hopefully can tell from doing this podcast, in person, talking the way that I'm talking now, filling out the information. Monstro had, arguably, maybe that's the reason why we butted heads, Steve, a certain way of coming across on the forums. One of the things that someone commented on after he passed away was that he referred to himself in the third person. But we forget, of course, that English wasn't his first language. Portuguese would have been his first language. And then you've got this online personality kind of stuff. I've used the name that I use on the forums for years, Mobster. We use him on his podcast. It's not my real name. And Monstro wasn't his real name. Marco Luis was his real name. So you come across in a certain particular way, but arguably also having a personality, coming across a certain particular way, in a way, kind of makes you famous. It becomes recognized. You don't need to use your real name. We all know who Monstro is. We see him. You know what he looks like.
It's like The Rock. I told someone that the other day.
Wait, how many times does he get called Dwayne Johnson?
Like, more people know his name as The Rock. They don't even know his real name. So it's the same thing, yeah. And look,
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I think a lot.
Listen, he will tell you, right? I've just used The Rock as an example, Steve. The stuff that The Rock does, and a few other people for charity and for his family and whatever else, is fantastic to see. But he's been working the wrestling side of the family, his personality, for a very long time. It's scripted. We know. They talk about even the promotional stuff, that when they was talking on a Friday night for the Saturday night matches, working that stuff up with the other wrestlers and so on and so forth, right? And so The Rock, who can you smell what's cooking, is a huge part of the way that he promoted himself and promoted the sport. And Monstro is doing exactly the same thing. When he refers to himself in the first one, Monstro thinks this. That's exactly what he's doing. He's creating an online personality, a persona. And again, it gets to the point where I started to see, look, give me an example, Steve, on one of the Facebook profiles, when someone has shared the news, within one day, and this is very good, trust me, because he's not arguably, or wasn't arguably an Olympia level bodybuilder, renowned in that particular way, but he had 1,500 people commenting, not just the likes, etc., but 1,500 people commented within 24 hours about his passing. He was recognized across a bunch of forums using the name Monstro. That gets you a kind of fame or infamy, call it whatever you like, but certainly recognition. So, it might seem slightly amusing, but again, like I said, it's a second language, maybe even a third language, certainly not his mother tongue. And so referring to yourself in a certain way may well have come from the fact that it was a second language. And then you start to realize that people kind of half like it. And then again, at the same point, and this is a huge part of his reason for being on Evolutionary, we're talking about having a professional bodybuilder. There are a bunch of athletes. I've made money from doing what I've done, but there are a bunch of athletes on there right now on our family of forums that would love to have a pro card. Some of them have been working towards it 2, 3, 4 years, multiple attempts, thousands of dollars. And Monstro was one of the handful, certainly I would say number one, in terms of, if you thought of a professional bodybuilder on our forums, Monstro was a professional bodybuilder. He had a pro card. He was being a professional bodybuilder. He was out there kicking ass. He was attending the expos. He was out there driven by the passion for the sport. And he was living, arguably, the pro bodybuilder lifestyle, Steve. Something I want to touch upon now, and I'll tell you now, it's super important when you run it, Steve. Training. Now, again, this is information that I've seen for myself with Instagram, a couple of conversations that him and I have had on the forums, and references he's made to training himself. So he's a big fan of the volume. I believe he talked about recently, last couple of months, before he passed away, typically 25 sets per body part. Now, that can be made up of multiple exercises. Something that most people probably wouldn't realize is that he trained at home, which is, let me just say that again. He trained at home and got a fucking pro card. He had the physique that you can see for yourself on the forums, on Instagram, on YouTube, with photographs online that have been posted afterwards, winning his pro card, winning competitions, winning his class by training in a home gym. This is not necessary. It's not. I would say, Steve, I've got a better home gym than he had. So he's produced a world-class physique in a gym that's not even as good as the one I've got here for training for strength. He's using power tech equipment. He's got dumbbells that probably got up to 60 pounds. There's a couple of exercise machines for cardio, but there's enough weight and enough machines. I think there was a Smith machine in there, Steve, that he could work his physique to the class, the depth of muscle, the maturity of muscle that you can see if you look at photographs of Monstro online. That in itself is proof that it is possible to train at home, train with not necessarily commercial level equipment, not in a big commercial gym where, and I've actually talked about people having to go to other gyms in order to train their legs properly if they want to win their class in a competition. Monstro proves that as a lie. He says, look, I'm doing this stuff in my gym underneath my house. So like everything's upstairs. It's not quite in the basement, Steve. It's like downstairs is gym equipment and garage. Upstairs is the living quarters. In the photographs that, again, you can see on Instagram. And here he is using the same equipment that you can go out and buy on Marketplace, on eBay, in your house, and train and develop a world-class physique. So what else does that mean? I mean, there's a bunch of pictures, again, on Instagram, social media, etc., where you can see him training his physique a certain way. And one of the things that he would do, and this is an awareness of what people like, right? And I'll touch upon the social media stuff specifically. I've done this as well. So it's quite simple. You train a certain particular way and you post a picture online or a video and you get 10 likes. And then you post a picture or video of something else and you get 100 likes. Well, that means that the people that follow you liked the second thing more than they liked the first thing. And in Monstro's case, he had vascularity to spare, right? So he would do certain exercises just for these video clips and photographs for his social media to make them fucking veins pop like a motherfucker, Steve. He realized that no one wants to see him squatting or benching. They certainly don't want to see him covered up. They want to see him wearing a vest and they want to see fucking arms popping veins. They want to see veins all over the chest. They want to see veins all over the delts. And he understood this. He made the most of his social media by giving the audience what they wanted to see, to train a certain particular way. So you might see him in Germany, ready for a FIBO, Steve, training in a commercial gym. You've certainly got a bunch of photographs of him doing rope curls with a pulley and just probably holding his breath, Steve. There's veins on the forehead, veins on the fucking delts, veins on the top of the chest, and certainly a bunch of veins on the arms. And knowing full well that people following him on social media are absolutely going to go, fuck me blind. That's the physique that I want. They're going to be blown away by that kind of stuff. I think the closest I get to it personally, Steve, is when I'm squatting some of the ridiculous stuff that I've been doing or some of the crazy, crazy great things.
Yeah, what I just want to say is, like, in America, we complain about our gyms, oh, this isn't this, this isn't that.
Yeah.
But like in America, we have like dumbbell racks. Like at my gym, there's like 3 different types of dumbbells, and the weights go from like 5 or 10 pounds to like over 100 pounds, like 120 pounds. And there's 3 different types of dumbbells with different grips and different sizes and different shapes and different types of material. And here, Monstro, his home gym, he's probably got like 3 or 4 weights.
10 maybe. Well, that's it.
Yeah, and they're like halfway rusted, and he's doing what he has to do. He lives on a very, isolated island, and just to ship in the weights, Like if you
Oh
were to order
man,
weights, how much would it cost
oh,
just to ship
the
the weights
price.
in? You
Yeah.
know, the shipping would cost more than
Oh no,
what the
yeah,
weights
yeah, yeah,
come.
crazy prices.
So I mean, it
And it,
just shows you he was able to do so much with less. If he had been from America or
oh
even
mate,
from Europe,
yeah.
France or Italy or
If
some,
he lived near me, Steve, and trained at the
yeah,
gym that I trained, hell, if he trained in my house, you can only imagine the facilities. If he had access to those facilities on a regular basis, the physique that he would have developed, how much quicker he might have developed it. But it proves that you can do stuff with very, very little. It proves that you can have a world-class physique with literally a room it's probably twice the length of a normal garage, Steve, but about the same width. It proves that, I think he had some stuff that was built for him by his dad years and years and years ago before he won his pro card, arguably. And so, again, it's just proof that you can live on an island with very little facilities where everything's crazy expensive in using nothing more than a double garage, essentially the equivalent of a double garage, with some home built equipment and some stuff that would have been super, super expensive to bring in, spending that money, think of it as an investment in physique and produce a physique that is absolutely world class. So, yeah, I mean, look, guys, some of that, I mean, what does that mean? It means he was determined, great genetics, but we discussed that already, determined to do his fucking goddamnest. I would like to, it's one of those things, and I think he even said this once. I don't train the way that you train. You don't train the way that I train, but I would like to see what you can do. And I think it's like, again, a little bit of that, I don't train for strength, you don't train for bodybuilding. I'd like to see if you train for bodybuilding what your physique would look like, and vice versa. So that's kind of cool right there. But this is the thing. Something I want to talk about, Steve, and this is so hard to fucking imagine, right? You have gone to Germany following your passion. I don't think he was working at that particular fever. I just think he was visiting. So he's gone there to enjoy it, to visit the stands, maybe do some of those photographs and videos, but I don't think he was repping that particular year, this year. And your wife's come with you, and this is the hard part, Steve. The idea that you die in more or less in the presence of your wife, but you are some thousands of miles away from where you live. We've seen these videos occasionally from time to time when some poor bastards become ill and the government's had to pay because the medical insurance won't cover it and they've had to fly them home. And that's when they're alive, Steve, because the place they're living in doesn't have the medical treatment. How hard would it have been for his wife to have had to deal with essentially on her fucking own when you're already grieving, dealing with the German government, dealing with the Portuguese embassy, consulate, whatever in Germany, and get Monstro back to where he lived just so that he can have the religious ceremonies, just so that he can be buried, interred, whatever the hell choice that he particularly made. I can't imagine being in her shoes and how fucking difficult that kind of stuff is. So, sometimes when it becomes professional bodybuilding, pros, even amateurs or whatever else, we tend to think of the athlete and not the family. We don't always understand the effects just of training, being selfish in order to win competitions can have on the family. But in this situation, she shared his passion. She kept herself in great nick, Steve. There are the occasional photographs and videos of them training together in their home gym, etc. And she's traveled with him to Germany, and now she's got to deal with. And she said this. I think there was something. I just read it again this morning, Steve, before we did this show. The 9 days between him dying and getting him home were some of the hardest days she's ever had to deal with in her life. And you can just try. It's difficult to imagine just how fucking difficult organizing all that would have been. Even if you're really good at doing that kind of stuff, you've still got the grief and aggravation and everything, the stress,
yeah,
and your partner's not there anymore. So that
yeah,
our hearts go out to her in that particular regard, Steve.
absolutely. So let me touch on that a little bit. So I didn't know his wife. And on the forum, he a lot of times, referred to my girlfriend, my girlfriend. I think he
Yeah,
mentioned wife, but again, is a language barrier. And what I actually think the term girlfriend is stupid too, because I mean, like if you're in your 40s and you call your spouse, and you mobster, same thing. Do you really call the person that you're with your girlfriend? I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's just like, it's not a
I've actually
girl.
been told off for that, Steve.
Yeah. I think
Until very recently, I
if you're a
used to phrase my other
teenager,
half. Yeah,
look, if
yeah,
you're a teenager, you can refer to, yeah, this is my girlfriend. So again, it's a language barrier. Let me touch on this, because his wife, though, from what I've seen in her pictures, she seems like she's in really good shape too. She's a
Yep.
bodybuilder
Lean.
herself. I'm
Yep.
sure she's into the PED scene and she does some rep work as well. So I think there's a couple things with that. It's like if you are that passionate as Monstro was, where this is his
Yes.
life, in his situation, it's beneficial to have a spouse who's going to also be into bodybuilding and be into it. So
Yes.
I think that's in his situation, that was definitely advantageous because if she's not going to be into it, it can definitely put a damper on the relationship and can really, I used to do, the Ironman and triathlons. I seen the top tier Ironman guys. These guys were traveling. These guys went to Hawaii to do the big Ironman in Hawaii once a year. I saw the strain. These guys, Mobster, we're talking about almost 100% divorce rate. Almost 100%. Because
Yeah.
if your wife's not going to support what you're doing and she's not seeing the monetization benefits of what you're doing. Why are you going to Hawaii once a year to do a competition to end up being in 55th place? You're not
Yeah.
walking
Yeah.
away with
Yeah. Yeah.
money. You're spending all
Yeah.
this money. The airline is
You're not here
losing.
with me. You're not here with the children.
It's a
There's stuff
four
around the
five
house that needs
thousand
doing.
it's a
Yeah.
$4,000 or $5,000 bicycle, and the airline loses your bicycle, ends up in Seattle when it should be in Honolulu,
Yeah.
and you got to pay for them to ship it from Seattle to Honolulu. I mean, you're bringing in 30,000 a year as a personal trainer, and then you're going off and you're traveling. Where is the benefit? So this is very important, and you have to give Monstro's wife a lot of
Yeah.
credit for supporting his lifestyle and supporting him.
Absolutely, man.
And
Absolutely.
one of the things she did say in her on her social media was, look, he died doing what he enjoyed doing. And
Yes.
that to me is very, very important, that she had that type of mentality and that positive outlook on it. She didn't say, you know what, damn, he was away from me and he died by himself and it took 9 days for me to get his body back
No,
to.
no, it was she had to do that. Yeah. Yeah. Listen, right? We've got, I mean, let's forget Monstro just for a second. And like Steve said with this, with the Ironman stuff, I've seen top professional strongmen. I've been around some high level bodybuilders. And obviously, as Steve knows, I'm a big fan of the history of the sport and whatever else. And there's a great phrase that's been used for many, many times, and it applies to women as much as it does to men. It doesn't matter who the athlete is, but it says that quite often, you really don't always get it and understand that if you get the support of a positive support from a partner that enables you to do the thing that's your passion in life, that maybe you become famous and so on and so forth. How helpful that is to dealing with the stress of a shitty relationship. An unsupportive partner is super bad, man. It's really difficult. I want to touch upon now, Steve, as Steve's letting me know, the grieving we've seen on the forum, right? So there's been a little bit of negative, and we'll touch on that briefly in a moment, is regards to the PED use, the high level PED use. And I've touched on it a little bit at the beginning. We're going to talk about the cycle momentarily. But again, this is a guy that was on the forums on a daily basis, Steve. I think the only time he wasn't is when he was all off doing these expos and traveling or whatever else. Otherwise, he was on the forum daily, helping people with the logs and being positive and saying, look, physique's looking good, diet's okay, or not, or whatever, and maybe coming in with some advice about PEDs and so on and so forth. But what does that mean? It means when you pass away, people miss that shit. They realize that you were adding value. They realize that you were there being supportive. And I mean, the one that stands out in my mind is SFDM, SFDOM. It was lives in San Francisco, hence the SF. And one of the things that he did, and this just stuck in my mind, and I think people really, really like this, Steve, is he went down to the beach, had a little moment, because he's that kind of person, and then in the sand on the beach did this big Monstro RIP kind of thing on the beach and posted a photograph on the forum. There was a couple of the guys who said that I went to the gym that night and hit the gym in a particular way with Monstro at the back of my mind, and this set's for Monstro or this training sessions for Monstro and whatever else. I kind of kept quiet, I've got to be honest. And I think in my mind, I was saving my energy and the way that I wanted to talk about him for this forum. But again, this is a great sign. It's always fucking horrendous, Steve. That it's after you fucking die, but it's a great sign of the impact that you have on people around you. Because when you've got, again, it's mostly men. There's a few women, of course, but it's disproportionately men grieving and posting nice things about you passing away and saying that you've had an impact and that they recognize you as a professional bodybuilder and so on and so forth, and grateful for the support you've given. Talk a little bit about that and what you saw,
Yeah,
Steve.
one of the things that's interesting about, situations like this is that a lot of the people on the forum, who, maybe they haven't dealt with this type of thing, and
The younger
Mobster
ones, especially, Steve. Yeah.
and Mobster, you've dealt with tragedy. Mobster and I actually lost a loved one around the same time. I think it was within like a week or two. We lost a
Yeah.
loved one about a year ago, a little more than a year ago.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, just over a year.
we've dealt with it. As you get older, you're gonna deal with, it's
Too many, Steve. Too
yeah.
many.
And what's interesting too, sometimes people you went to college with, some people you went to high school with,
Yes.
they'll start
Yes.
passing away, and they'll really
Yeah.
hit home, and you'd be like, "Wow, this is
Younger than me, Steve. Multiples younger than me. Recently.
One of the things that I found fascinating was some of the people, were coming to me and they were really concerned. They were like, "My gosh, like, you know, I'm always under the, people, they're like, oh, well, I'm under the impression that the media tries to scare us about steroids and, that steroids aren't that bad for you and all this stuff." And they were kind of coming to me and they're like, "Steve, like, I want to make sure
Good.
that I do this the
Yeah.
right way.
Yes.
And I want to
Yes.
make sure that I'm not abusing steroids." And so, that was kind of the fascinating thing that I saw,
Good.
besides, like you said, the people who are like just in shock. Because, a lot of
Yes.
people, they're like, 1 minute, this guy is like, I'm talking to this
Yeah.
guy
Yeah.
online, I'm arguing with this guy online, I'm debating with this guy
Yeah.
online.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah. Yeah.
helping me with my diet, he's helping me with my training, he's telling me to push more, do more steroids, do more this, do more that. And then the next minute he's gone. And I think that
Yes.
shocks a lot of people. Go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, look, as an older person, I'll agree with Steve because I've told stories before. And I think you may even mentioned his story online about having a young 21-year-old fellow at the gym counter, and he's kind of like in a bit of a tiz. He's kind of, so what's the matter, buddy? And he says, listen, I've got a funeral. I've never been to a funeral. Fuck me. You've never been to a funeral. Of course you haven't. You're only 18, 19, 20 years of age, whatever. What do I do? And I'm like, mate, honestly, look, first things first, as Steve said, it's part of the rich tapestry of life, not the nice part, but it's still part of life. Just be helpful. Don't worry about how you can dress. If you can do the black shirt, black trousers thing, great. If you can't, borrow them. And if you can't do that, don't fucking worry about it. The fact that you go there to support people is probably more important. If it's difficult to deal with your own grief, sometimes you can help in a particular way by helping other people at the funeral and so on and so forth. So like Steve said, if you're, I won't say used to it because it's never a fucking thing. I don't want to get used to people dying, Steve. And in a way, even when neighbours have passed away, I've had a little tear in my eye or whatever else, because you should miss a person when they've gone. They should have a positive impact on your life and whatever else, right? So absolutely, and it's being empathetic. It's having some humanity. I don't have a lot of that shit, Steve. So it's nice when I occasionally realise I'm a fucking human being who actually misses people when they pass away. So again, in that particular regards, the younger people, the people that are out there kicking ass and not thinking about their health or whatever else, you're fucking reminded that you are mortal. You will die one day. And you might die for doing stupid fucking shit you shouldn't be doing. So there's an argument for two things. One is that the younger people are just shocked by the idea, as Steve said, that someone they literally was talking to 2 days ago on the forums is no longer going to be back. They're gone. They've disappeared. They're removed from this mortal coil. And the other thing is that you have had your changer. You are reminded that sometimes we do stupid, fucked up shit. Now, whether that's recreational stuff, risky behavior, whatever, that you are just as mortal as that motherfucker you was talking to 2 days ago. And he was doing stuff that may have risked his health. Absolutely. So there's a lesson for those people that might be risking their health. to think about what they're doing. Steve and I cover these on podcasts. We try it even with Monstro. You have to remember Monstro was a professional. There's an argument to be made in regards to the kind of things that you might want to do or might feel that you need to do as a professional, needing to be more out there than recreational lifters. You know, someone who just wants a bigger chest doesn't need to do thousands of milligrams a week. Someone who wants to win the greatest competition there possibly is, and to change their family's life forever with $400,000 or $500,000 wins, and to become arguably a legend in the sport, might consider that what they need to do is certainly going to be harder on their body than a recreational bodybuilder. And to echo his wife's sentiments, it's almost a sort of meme and a joke, Steve, when we say, if, as a lifter, you go, the old joke about a lifter is, if I die in the gym lifting, put 2 more plates on the bar, then call the ambulance. You kind of almost want them to think you died doing 1,000 pounds or something. There's an argument to be maybe made in that the behavior you might elicit in terms of PEDs is risky, and we could talk about that as we will in a second, but also a necessity in its own particular way, certainly in the mind of the athlete in question, that they need to do this particular thing to be the fucking monster, the freak, the pro card winning bodybuilder that you wanted to be. And so, okay, so echo his wife's sentiments, to die doing what you're doing, but certainly when you're young enough, because he was only 40 or 41, 42 years of age, to appreciate that you were doing a fantastic thing, to appreciate that you had that life. Maybe there's an argument to be made that dying in those circumstances is, if not preferable, it's almost okay. It's almost, I died doing what I like to do. I died traveling to an exhibition. I died being on my way to go out and meet all these fans and enjoy doing the shit that I like to do. So, you know, I'll kind of joke about it. It might be slightly in poor taste, but again, if I die squatting 1,000, at least I could say I squatted 1,000, you know, that kind of vibe, Steve. And again, like I said, younger people that only knew him figuratively, maybe they didn't get that strong connection with him at the particular time, but you soon realize an impact that you've had where either pulls you up short for your own PED use, or it just pulls you up short and reminds you of the mortality that we're all fucking mortal, that we're all going to die one day, and you need to be reminded from time to time that that's the case. And again, like I said, just literally missing the positive influence that you might have had on your training or your nutrition, or making you want to go to the gym and look like Monstro at some point in your own lifting career and your own lifting life.
Yeah, so
let's move on.
Let's get into his steroid cycle, but I just want to make a couple points here. And you know, look, at the end of the day, if you use anabolic, if you abuse anabolic steroids, it's going to shorten your life. How much it shortens your life depends. Some of you, it's going to shorten your life. You may have lived to 80 years old, and it may shorten your life to 60 or 65 or 70 or 75. Some of you will shorten your life into your 50s. Some of you, it's going to be in your 40s. Some of you, like Dallas McCarver or Boston Lloyd, it's going to be even younger than that.
30s and 40s, yeah.
20s even, you know? So it just depends. You know, so, but if you use steroids and you cycle them correctly and you know, cycle them on and off, you can end up living a long and fruitful life. I mean, Arnold Schwarzenegger, for example,
it is 77, 78, Steve.
Yeah, he's still going. He used anabolic steroids. He's openly admitted he used anabolic steroids. So he's
Yes.
also made sure he's kept an eye on his organs, his heart health. He's had some I think he had one procedure on his heart, which is fine. If you've got an issue, get the job done. It's not about.
He's had two, Steve. He had one some years ago, which was publicized.
So if you have an issue,
recently,
make sure you go to your doctor. You're working with a cardiologist as you get older, and you're checking on this stuff, because if you can get it knocked out before it becomes a problem, then that's better. If you wait till your arteries are clogged 90%, 95%, then you get the heart attack, that's going to be a lot harder to deal with than getting the arteries unclogged before the heart attack comes. You see, that's my point. So it's about preventative medicine. So very, very important to do that. And Monstro tried to do that as much as he could, but he was still abusing steroids to the point. And we're going to go over his steroid cycle so you understand what I'm talking about. Just the injectables alone on his contest prep cycle. And this is what he said. This isn't us making a cycle out of
this is literally the cycle that he did to get in condition for the recent FIBO that he went to attend. I want to say one more thing, Steve, and that is bodybuilding has a bad reputation when it comes to PED use, but trust me, there are a bunch of sports and activities where you can do fucked up stupid shit and it can come off really badly.
Concussions will
Yeah,
reduce your
yes,
lifespan. It causes brain damage. Playing football,
yeah,
hockey,
yeah.
taking hits.
Crash, motor racing, smashing the car,
Yes.
catching fire,
Boxing,
parachute.
MMA, all this shit.
Yes,
You get hit in the
yes.
head this many times, you're
And
gonna
some of them are
cause
using PEDs as well, Steve. Not just of activity, but they're using drugs in order to be better at that activity. But it doesn't get us talked about as much as the drug use in bodybuilding for whatever reason. And I said, this is through FIBA. I'll read this list out, Steve, and I'll just literally read out the list. And it's going to sound crazy, just me reading
and
it out,
he
right?
and we know that he also mostly used EuroPharmacies. He used some other brands,
Yes,
but
yes, yes,
mostly EuroPharmacies was his favorite brand. In fact, he's
yes.
posted pictures on the forums of his
Of product, yeah,
EuroPharmacies
yeah,
orders. So he was a
yes.
big fan of EuroPharma. So go ahead, Monster. Yeah.
Right. So this is testing amphate, 2,100 milligrams a week. That right there's a high. Tren, 1,400 milligrams a week. Anything over a gram's crazy, and anything over 600 milligrams is
Even
crazy.
like me, 250 milligrams a week of Tren by itself made
Yes.
me fucking miserable.
Oh,
And
mate, I had a little tiny bit
you
more than
know,
that, and I could feel the effects on my body.
yes.
Restaurant, 1,400 milligrams a week. Winstrol, oral, 100 milligrams a day. That's 700 milligrams a week. Superdrol, 30 milligrams a day. That's 210 milligrams a week. T4, 100 micrograms a day. T3, 12.5 micrograms a day.
Yeah, these are
Clenbuterol,
thyroid. So he was
yes, all
using both
thyroid.
T4
Yeah,
and T3. The reason why, let's kind of explain these. So he was using the three injectables, Test, Tren, and Masteron. So we know that, bodybuilders, they love Tren and Masteron. That's like that was Monstro's favorite two steroids on the forums. He'd always mention those two. That was, and it makes sense because they go together like peanut butter and jelly. And Tren is, an amazing steroid. The testosterone, 2,100 milligrams. I'm kind of surprised at that. A lot of bodybuilders will actually swap in equipoise instead of testosterone. But he liked his testosterone high. But he also did a lot of other things as we're going to go into this cycle, like running AIs a lot at high dosing, and that offset the aromatization from the testosterone. But it'd be interesting to know. I think he probably cut off the testosterone right before the competition, maybe a couple weeks ahead of time, so it was more out of your system. The Winstrol and Superdrol, those are orals, very, very toxic steroids. And a big reason why he liked the Masteron and Winstrol is its ability to bind to SHBG was really good. Superdrol, 30 milligrams a day. Just running for me, Superdrol, 20 milligrams a day by itself.
yep.
Absolutely made me miserable. So I can't imagine 30 milligrams a day with all this other stuff. It's an insane
The steroids
amount.
alone, Steve, come to 5,810 milligrams.
Yeah.
The thyroid drugs, as we said, clenbuterol.
So a big reason for the thyroid drugs as well as was the HGH use, because when you abuse HGH over time, you need to take a thyroid medication to kind of offset the effects it has on your metabolism. You see, it's not for people who use HGH at like 2 IUs a day or 1 IU a day, which is a hormone replacement therapy dosage. He was abusing HGH, which we're going to get to shortly. So that's the reason why both the T4 and T3 was in place. Clenbuterol, as Mobster mentioned, 120 micrograms a day. Again, just running Clen by itself at 120 micrograms a day is absolutely death. I hate that stuff. I mean, you feel like death on it. You get daily heartburn, you get headaches, you're dehydrated, you get shaky hands. So it was incredible that he was running all this other stuff and the clenbuterol. Now, why would he run the clenbuterol and the thyroid medications? Also for fat loss. Speed up the metabolism, keep your body more warm,
harden up, get leaner,
cut more calories, make your cardio more effective in terms of calorie output. And this means he can do 15 minutes of cardio and burn more calories than he would without the clenbuterol. He'd have to do like 30 minutes. So it basically was a time saver too and helped him burn more calories.
Yeah, Proviron, 50 milligrams a day. Both the Proviron and Masteron, as we covered in a couple of podcasts we've recorded recently, and they're going to enhance the effects of the other anabolics you're already using. In brackets, it says up to 100, maybe 100. The next, I don't know if you're going to try to pronounce this, Steve. I believe it's a Portuguese AI. It's an AI.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
Aromacin, and he was getting
yes,
25 milligrams a day. So,
yes.
for those of you out there running normal cycles, 25 milligrams a day would completely crash your estrogen. But remember, he's running 2,100 milligrams a day of testosterone. So he would have to want to basically crash his estrogen to prevent any bloat. So that would be the reason for that. Raylox, same thing, 60 milligrams a day. It's another anti-estrogen. Dosinex is anti-prolactin.
The microgram, yeah.
Yeah, and that would be because of the trend. And then HGH, this is the big one, and this is where he, this is where it really came into focus. Him doing his repping work and doing his monetization to be able to afford 10 IUs before bed and 10 IUs fast in the morning. So he
Yeah,
basically be
yeah,
going
daily.
through
Yep,
an
yep.
insane amount of HGH. So that's 2 vials of HGH that he was going through a day. And if a kit comes in with 10, so he's going through an entire kit in less than a week. So
Yeah,
you got to figure a kit costs maybe $300, right?
yes,
So
yes.
he's
There or
basically blowing
thereabouts
through over $300 worth of HGH
a week.
a week. So now you
Yeah.
can see why he needed, these rep works and stuff. So you can imagine a big chunk of his um, income, mobster, was being used. Now you see why there's so many divorces in bodybuilding. Like, can you imagine if your spouse, just put yourself in this situation, imagine your spouse was spending over $300 just on HGH a week.
I
Wouldn't
couldn't
you be
physically
pissed?
justify doing this, Steve, even if my income was above average. I couldn't physically justify the return on my investment. I can't.
But he had to
I can,
do it because he had the goals. IGF 200 IUs pre-workout. Again, IGF is not cheap, and it can be a pain in the ass
that's
because there's going to be a lot of waste
pre-workout.
involved.
Yep, pre-workout. Humalog. There's no number for it,
Insulin,
unfortunately.
yeah. So Humalog,
Yep,
there's no number because every day was different. It just depends on how many carbs he was taking
meals.
in,
Yep, yep.
and so he kind of would,
I'm guessing, Steve. I'm guessing. I believe I've seen something, but we didn't put it in the notes here because he didn't include it at the top. But I have seen something to the effect of I think we were talking about with every meal, a small amount of insulin with
Yes.
every single
And
meal.
the
Yeah,
reason for that is because you want to take advantage of every meal. You want to get the nutrient
yeah.
partitioning for every meal. So a meal without insulin is like a waste. So a lot of bodybuilders will do is they'll take insulin first thing in the morning, then eat breakfast, but they'll take long acting insulin and then they'll take short acting insulin before specific meals and they'll target specific meals. So that makes basically it makes your muscles like a sponge throughout the day. So it is a little bit of a pain in the ass because then you have to manage your blood sugar. You have to make sure your blood sugar doesn't
Yes,
crash. So
yes.
it's not that hard to do. I mean, but some bodybuilders have gotten themselves into trouble. But with him, he had to always make sure I have some juice on hand in case something would go wrong. So um, tell me sartan, which is 8 milligrams a day for blood pressure. So he was aware of his heart issues already. Ursulfalk, and this is a liver protection and a cholesterol medication. So
I
he
think
was,
it's almost ironic including something at the end like that because you definitely want to have some means or
you
method to
have
protect
to.
and he's aware of it, but the sheer amount and this I'm not just on our forums but elsewhere, Steve. I don't want to bang the drum too much because listen, right? Most of what we're talking about on the show is positive. We're talking about the impact he's had on people, the way that he was motivating people, and whatever else. But listen, right? You need for the typical listener that's listening to this show is almost a perverse fascination to sometimes hear what a pro's doing. And again, I'll touch upon the simple fact that you, as listeners, you've got your own particular journey. You can be motivated. You can be inspired by Monstro. You can see his physiques. You can see the things that he was doing for the sport. You can see how great he was out there being a professional bodybuilder. You must have sort of also an understanding that sometimes there are certain elements of what makes you a top professional bodybuilder or indeed an athlete in any sport can be arguably risky. And if the risk versus reward, if you're not going to make thousands and thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, you have to think hard about the things that you're doing. And there's a little bit of a warning for you when it comes to dying at age 41. I'm 60, so I've got 19 fucking years on him. 41 is no age. It really isn't. It's not fucking enough, Steve. And so if you are going to think of going down that route, you imagine maybe you could be pro.
He was
He's an inspiration.
46, right?
It's
46, not 41.
46. So you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's an inspiration for being able to train at home. He's an inspiration for living his dream. He's an inspiration for being a proper, and I mean proper, and I want to underline that and emphasize a proper professional fucking bodybuilder in a way that many people that aren't quite there yet don't imagine you have to be. You do. You got to work it. You've got to be putting stuff on social media. You've got to be traveling several thousands of miles, multiple, like Steve said, boat and fucking plane and then another boat or whatever, just to get to these things and do this kind of stuff. And it is a job of work. And Monstro was out there, to put it in crudely, Steve, killing it. He was out there kicking ass. He was out there being a pro's pro and making sure that he was meeting his top other pros and shaking hands and showing his own appreciation for the sport and doing what needed to be fucking done. But equally, you must be aware that there might be certain elements that could be considered risky and unhealthy, and you should be aware of that too. I'll finally put to say that we're grateful for EuroPharmacies letting us put this show out today. We know that Monstro was a huge fan of their particular products, and you can see just how successful they was in terms of developing a world-class physique with Monstro putting in the fucking work in the gym to create that element as well. As always, please note, we are not doctors and the opinions are ours. It's our view based on our experience and views on the topic. Our podcasts are for informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment applies.